My name is Emily Carson, 29 years old, and until recently, I was a successful software engineer with a bright future ahead of me. Then came the accident that left me unconscious in a hospital bed, fighting for my life. When the doctors called my parents, their response shattered whatever was left of my heart. "She's not our real daughter. We owe her nothing," they said before walking away, leaving me to die. A week later, they showed up with my sister, expecting to claim my inheritance, but my bed was empty. All they found was a letter, and the moment they read it, their faces went white. Before I dive into how I survived and what that letter contained, let me know where you're watching from, and tap subscribe to follow my journey to justice. Growing up in suburban Chicago with Gregory and Diana Carson, I believed I had a normal childhood. Our house on Maple Street was modest, but comfortable, with a backyard, where Dad built me a treehouse when I was 8. Mom would bake chocolate chip cookies every Sunday, and we'd play board games as a family on Friday nights. I was their only child then, and felt cherished, at least until I turned 12. That's when I started noticing little things that didn't quite add up. Unlike my friends' parents, mine never showed baby pictures of me before age 3. When classmates commented that I looked nothing like either of my parents, with my auburn hair and green eyes contrasting their blonde hair and blue eyes, Mom would quickly change the subject. At family gatherings, I caught whispers from relatives, strange comments that stopped when I walked into the room. The Carson charity case. I overheard my Aunt Barbara call me once at Thanksgiving when she thought I was outside. My cousin immediately shushed her, and they both gave me plastic smiles when I entered the kitchen. Everything changed the summer I turned 16. While searching for Christmas decorations in our attic, I found a metal lockbox behind some old suitcases. Curiosity got the better of me, and after some determined attempts with a hairpin I'd learned from a YouTube video, I managed to open it. Inside were my adoption papers. I sat there in the dusty attic for hours, reading through documents that explained I had been adopted at age 3 after my biological parents died in a house fire. There were newspaper clippings about the tragedy, a death certificate for Sarah and Michael Reynolds, and photos of a little girl I barely recognized as myself. When I confronted my parents at dinner that night, holding the papers with trembling hands, their reaction wasn't what I expected. There were no tearful explanations, no reassurances that I was still their daughter in every way that mattered. "You weren't supposed to find those," Dad said coldly, not meeting my eyes. "Were you ever going to tell me?" I asked, my voice breaking. Mom sighed, looking annoyed rather than sympathetic. "We took you in as a charity case, Emily. Your parents were friends of friends and nobody else would take you. We did our Christian duty." Their words cut through me like ice. Christian duty, charity case, not daughter, never daughter. 1 year later, when I was 17, Mom got pregnant. The change in their behavior was immediate and stark. Suddenly, the house was filled with baby pictures, sonogram images proudly displayed on the refrigerator. They converted my treehouse into a garden shed to make room for a proper nursery painted in delicate pastels. Dad took extra shifts at work to save for a college fund for my sister before she was even born. When Melanie arrived, she was treated like royalty from day one. The contrast in how they treated us was painful and obvious. While I had to work part-time jobs throughout high school to save for college, they started a dedicated account for Melanie's education. When I received acceptance letters from universities, there was no celebration, just a reminder that I would need scholarships, because they were investing in Melanie's future. I worked 3 jobs through college: barista mornings, library assistant afternoons, and weekend shifts at a call center. I slept 4 hours a night, lived on ramen noodles, and graduated with honors in computer science with student loans I would be paying off for decades. Not once did they attend any of my graduations or achievements. After graduation, I landed a job at a tech company in Seattle. The distance from Chicago was a relief. Our communication dwindled to obligatory Christmas cards and occasional terse phone calls. The last time I spoke to them was 7 years ago, when I called to tell them about my promotion to senior engineer. Dad answered, said, "That's nice. and handed the phone to Melanie, who was 12 by then, to tell me about her dance recital. I built a new life in Seattle. My apartment overlooking Puget Sound became my sanctuary. I made friends at work, joined a hiking group, volunteered at a local animal shelter. I dated occasionally, though I struggled to trust enough for a serious relationship. My therapist said this was understandable given my background. The hardest lesson I had to learn was that sometimes the family you're born into or adopted into isn't your real family. I was slowly creating my own chosen family of friends who actually cared about me. I was healing one day at a time, until the night of the accident that changed everything. It was a rainy Friday night in October. I was driving back from a tech conference in Portland, where I had presented our company's new encryption software to industry leaders. The presentation had gone well, and I was feeling accomplished as I navigated the winding mountain roads back to Seattle. My playlist of 80s power ballads kept me company, as windshield wipers fought against the increasing downpour. I remember checking my GPS and seeing I was about an hour from home. I remember adjusting my seatbelt. I remember the flash of headlights suddenly veering into my lane. What I learned later was that a drunk driver had crossed the center line. His blood alcohol level was 3 times the legal limit. He walked away with a broken arm. I wasn't so lucky. The impact was catastrophic. My car crumpled like an accordion, the airbag deployed, but couldn't fully protect me from the force of the collision. My chest slammed against the steering wheel, breaking 4 ribs. My head hit the side window, causing a traumatic brain injury. My left leg was crushed between twisted metal. Later, doctors would tell me I was technically dead for 2 minutes before paramedics revived me at the scene. I have flashes of memory from the rescue, the metallic taste of blood in my mouth, the sound of metal being cut away by the jaws of life, someone telling me to hang on, that help was coming. I remember the whir of helicopter blades as I was airlifted to Seattle Grace Hospital. Then nothing but darkness for days. I was in the ICU for a week, machines breathing for me, monitoring my heart rate, draining fluid from my brain to reduce swelling. My body was broken in 12 different places. The doctors weren't sure if I would survive, and if I did, whether I would have permanent brain damage. Hospital staff searched my phone for emergency contacts. I had listed my parents years ago and never changed it, a strange oversight for someone who had otherwise cut ties so completely. Nurse Rachel Johnson was the one who called them. She later told me every detail of that conversation. Mr. and Mrs. Carson, this is Rachel Johnson, calling from Seattle Grace Hospital. Your daughter Emily has been in a serious car accident. There was a pause. Then my father's voice, cold and distant. Emily isn't our daughter. Not really. Rachel was taken aback, but continued professionally. Sir, Emily has you listed as her emergency contact. She's in critical condition. We need family here to make medical decisions. She may not survive without specific procedures that require family consent. We adopted her as a child. It was a charity thing. We haven't spoken in years, my mother interjected. We have our own daughter to worry about. But legally you're still her parents, Rachel insisted. She needs someone to advocate for her right now. Look, we owe her nothing, my father said firmly. She's an adult. This isn't our problem. Don't call us again. They hung up, leaving Rachel stunned. In 20 years of nursing, she had never encountered parents refusing to help their child, adopted or not. The hospital ethics committee met to discuss my case. Without an advocate, certain procedures couldn't be approved. Rachel took it upon herself to stay with me after her shifts ended, talking to me, even though I was unconscious, holding my hand through the worst nights. She became my unofficial guardian, arguing with administrators to get me the care I needed. I drifted in and out of consciousness during this time. I caught fragments of conversations, doctors discussing my prognosis, nurses changing my bandages, Rachel reading me the news, even though she wasn't sure I could hear her. I couldn't respond, trapped in my broken body, but I was aware more than they realized. One conversation I remember clearly, a doctor telling Rachel, without approval for this surgery, Her chances drop below 30%. We need a family member, or power of attorney. Her family abandoned her, Rachel, replied her voice breaking. They literally said they owe her nothing, and left her to die. I remember thinking, even through the haze of pain and medication, that this confirmed what I had always suspected about my place in their lives. I was truly alone. My condition deteriorated. The brain swelling wasn't responding to medication. The infection in my leg was threatening to spread. Without approval for more aggressive treatments, the medical team was running out of options. Rachel fought for me fiercely, but hospital regulations were clear. They needed legal authority to proceed. It seemed that my parents would get their wish. I was dying alone except for the kindness of a nurse who refused to give up on a patient she had never even spoken to. But then, something unexpected happened, something that would change everything. On the 8th day after my accident, a new doctor entered my room. Through my hazy consciousness, I heard Rachel greeting him. "Dr. Bennett, thank you for coming. This is the patient I told you about." I felt someone gently lift my eyelid, checking my pupil response with a penlight. Then, a sharp intake of breath. "My God," the man said. "That's Emily Carson." "You know her?" Rachel sounded surprised. "We were in college together at MIT, same computer science program. I lost touch with her after graduation." His voice moved closer. Emily, it's Marcus Bennett. Can you hear me?" I couldn't respond, but somewhere in the fog of my mind the name registered. Marcus Bennett. We had studied together, pulled all-nighters before exams celebrated, when our team won the coding competition our junior year. He had asked me out once, but I was too focused on graduating early to date anyone. As I drifted back into unconsciousness, I heard Marcus asking Rachel about my condition, his voice growing increasingly alarmed as she explained the situation with my parents. "They refused to help. That's criminal negligence," he said angrily. "Who's making medical decisions for her?" "Nobody. That's the problem. We're doing everything we can within protocol, but without consent for the more aggressive treatments." "I'm a neurosurgeon," Marcus said firmly, "and I'm her friend. I'll take this to court if I have to." What followed was a legal battle that I only learned about later. Marcus contacted his friend Stephanie Walker, a medical rights attorney who filed for emergency medical power of attorney. The hospital's legal team was initially resistant, citing protocols and liability concerns. Meanwhile, my condition worsened. The pressure in my brain reached critical levels. Without surgery in the next 24 hours, I would likely suffer permanent damage or death. An emergency court hearing was conducted in the hospital conference room. Judge Patricia Hamilton presided via video call, reviewing my medical records and the documentation of my parents' refusal to help. "In 30 years on the bench, I've never seen such a clear case of abandonment," she said. "I am granting temporary medical authority to Dr. Bennett, effective immediately." Within an hour, I was in surgery. Marcus himself led the procedure to relieve the pressure on my brain, working alongside the hospital's top trauma surgeon to address my other injuries. The operation lasted 14 hours. When I finally woke up truly conscious for the first time in nearly 2 weeks, Marcus was sitting beside my bed reviewing my charts. I couldn't speak because of the intubation tube, but I managed to move my fingers slightly. He noticed immediately. "Emily, can you hear me? Squeeze my hand if you can understand me." I squeezed weakly. His smile was tired but genuine. "Welcome back. You've been through hell, but you're going to be okay." Over the next few days, as the tube was removed and I regained my ability to speak, Marcus and Rachel filled me in on everything that had happened. When they told me about my parents' response, I wasn't surprised, just numb. "There's something else you should know," Marcus said hesitantly on the 3rd day after I woke up. "While Stephanie was preparing the emergency power of attorney, she did some research into your finances and legal situation." He explained that I had accumulated significant assets, my Seattle apartment, worth $700,000 in the booming market, my investment portfolio, my savings, and a life insurance policy through my employer. All told, if I had died, my estate would have been worth nearly $2 million. Without a will, your next of kin would inherit everything, Stephanie explained when she visited later. Despite their estrangement legally, that would be your adoptive parents. The realization hit me like another car crash. My parents hadn't just abandoned me out of indifference or lack of love. They had made a calculated decision. By refusing to approve life-saving procedures, they were essentially ensuring my death and their financial gain. They left me to die for money. I whispered the words, feeling hollow and surreal. Marcus took my hand. We have the documentation of their refusal to help. The nurse recorded the call, as per hospital protocol. We can go to the police with this. But as I lay there processing this ultimate betrayal, a different idea formed in my mind. A way to confront them that would reveal their true nature not just to the law but to themselves. I have a better plan, I said, but I'll need your help. Recovery was excruciating. Each day brought new pain as my body slowly mended. Physical therapy sessions left me drenched in sweat and tears. Learning to walk again with my shattered leg was like being a toddler with none of the joy of discovery, only the frustration of a body that refused to cooperate. But the physical pain was nothing compared to the emotional wound of knowing my parents had left me to die for financial gain. In the quiet hours of the night, when the hospital grew, still this knowledge would consume me. How could the people who raised me, who once built me a treehouse and baked me cookies, decide my life was worth less than my bank account? During this time, Marcus visited daily, adjusting my treatment plan and sitting with me through the worst moments. Rachel continued to check on me, even when I was no longer her assigned patient. They became my anchors in a world that had shifted beneath my feet. 2 weeks after I regained consciousness, Stephanie Walker brought me legal documents to review. She had been researching adoption laws and inheritance statutes. Your adoption was finalized when you were 4 years old, she explained, spreading papers across my hospital tray. Under Washington state law, your adoptive parents have the same inheritance rights as biological parents, despite the estrangement. So they would have gotten everything if I had died, I said flatly. Yes, but there's more. Stephanie flipped through her notes. I ran a background check on your parents. They're in serious financial trouble. Your father's business failed last year. They've mortgaged their house twice, and there are 3 credit cards in collections. She showed me another document. This is really interesting. Your sister Melanie is registered at Northwestern University, but her tuition for this semester is unpaid. The deadline for payment is next week. I stared at the paper dots connecting in my mind. They need money desperately, and I'm worth more dead than alive to them. Exactly. And we have hospital records documenting their refusal to help you, which could constitute criminal negligence or even attempted homicide under certain interpretations of the law. As Stephanie outlined possible legal actions, a plan began forming in my mind. Not just legal justice, but a confrontation that would force them to face what they had done. What if we let them think I died? I suggested. Marcus and Stephanie exchanged concerned glances. That would be ethically complicated, Marcus began. Not legally dead, I clarified. Just let them believe the consequences of their actions played out. Let them come here, expecting to claim my estate only to discover the truth. Over the next few days, my plan took shape. Stephanie confirmed it wasn't illegal to let someone believe you had died without falsifying death certificates. The hospital administration was initially reluctant, but became supportive after reviewing the documented evidence of my parents' abandonment. I wrote a detailed letter pouring every emotion and fact into it. The letter outlined their actions, included transcripts of their phone conversation with Rachel, documented the emergency court hearing that saved my life, and revealed my knowledge of their financial motivations. We should document their reaction, Rachel suggested. For your protection, but also as evidence if they try to contest anything later. With the help of a hospital security technician, we set up a hidden camera system in my room. Marcus arranged for me to be transferred to a private rehabilitation facility under an alias for my protection, ensuring that when my parents arrived, they would find an empty bed. The hardest part was deciding what to say to Melanie in the letter. My sister was 19 now, a sophomore in college. We had never been close, the age gap, and our parents' obvious favoritism, creating a chasm between us, but she wasn't responsible for our parents' actions. Tell her the truth, Rachel advised. She deserves to know who her parents really are. So I added a section to the letter addressed specifically to Melanie, explaining that this wasn't her fault, that I held no grudge against her, and offering my contact information if she ever wanted to reach out. As my transfer date approached, my anxiety grew. What if my parents never came? What if they didn't care enough, even to claim their inheritance? But Stephanie had been monitoring their activities through her investigator. They've booked flights to Seattle for next Tuesday, she confirmed. Exactly 1 week after they refused to help you. All 3 of them are coming. The night before my transfer, I could barely sleep. The gravity of what I was about to do weighed heavily on me. Was this justice or revenge? Was I becoming as calculating as they were? Rachel sat with me during her break. What you're doing isn't just for you, she said gently. Think about the next patient whose family might abandon them. Your case could change hospital policies, could make people think twice before making the choice your parents made. Her words steadied me. This wasn't just about my pain. It was about standing up for the truth, about consequences, for cruel choices. The next morning I was moved to Evergreen Rehabilitation Center, under the name Emily Reynolds, reclaiming the birth name I had discovered in those adoption papers so many years ago. Everything was in place. Now all we could do was wait for my parents and sister to arrive, expecting to claim the inheritance of their dead daughter, only to find a letter instead. Tuesday arrived with a heavy Seattle drizzle, the kind that seems to seep into your bones. From my room at Evergreen Rehabilitation Center, I watched the raindrops trace patterns on the window, while Marcus set up his laptop. The security feed is live, he said, adjusting the screen so I could see. Hospital security confirmed your parents arrived 10 minutes ago. They're speaking with administration now. My heart hammered in my chest as I watched the black and white security footage. There they were after 7 years, Gregory and Diana Carson, looking older but immediately recognizable. My father's once blonde hair was now gray, and my mother's face had new lines, but her posture was still rigid, with the same self-righteousness I remembered. And there, standing slightly apart from them, was Melanie. No longer the child I remembered, but a young woman of 19, with our mother's blonde hair and blue eyes. She looked uncomfortable, arms crossed protectively over her chest, glancing around the hospital corridor with visible anxiety. They're putting on quite a show, Rachel commented, watching over my shoulder. Indeed, my mother was dabbing at dry eyes with a tissue, while my father spoke solemnly with the hospital administrator, his hand placed dramatically over his heart. We couldn't hear the conversation, but Stephanie, who was positioned in a waiting area nearby, texted updates to Marcus's phone. Your father is asking about your personal effects and whether there was a will, Marcus read. The administrator is explaining that they'll be directed to your room shortly, where they can collect your belongings. I felt strangely calm as I watched them follow a nurse down the corridor toward what had been my room. Everything that could hurt me about these people had already happened. Now, I was simply a witness to their true characters being revealed. The camera angle changed to show the interior of my former hospital room. The bed was neatly made, the equipment removed. On the pillow lay a thick envelope with Gregory, Diana, and Melanie Carson written on the front. They entered the room looking around in confusion. Where are her things? My father demanded. The nurse gestured to the envelope. This was left for you. My mother snatched it up, tearing it open with none of the hesitation one might expect from a grieving parent. My father looked over her shoulder as she unfolded the pages inside. Dear Gregory, Diana, and Melanie, if you're reading this, you've come to claim what you believe is yours after my death. How quickly you arrived, exactly 1 week after you told Nurse Rachel Johnson. She's not our real daughter. We owe her nothing. Yes, that conversation was recorded as is hospital protocol. I've enclosed a transcript, though. I'm sure you remember your words. What you may not know is that I was starting to regain consciousness during that time. I heard you abandon me to die. The doctors needed your consent for procedures that would save my life. By refusing, you made a choice, believing that choice would lead to your financial gain. My apartment investments and life insurance would transfer to you as next of kin, solving your considerable financial problems. I know about the business failure, Dad. The second mortgage, Mom. The unpaid tuition bill for Melanie's fall semester at Northwestern. I know you need money desperately. And I know you calculated that I was worth more to you dead than alive. What you didn't count on was Dr. Marcus Bennett, recognizing me as his former classmate from MIT. You didn't anticipate him fighting for emergency medical power of attorney granted by Judge Patricia Hamilton after reviewing your abandonment. You didn't expect me to survive your betrayal. But I did survive. I am alive despite your best efforts. And I want you to know that everything you came here hoping to claim is protected. My will, signed and notarized yesterday, ensures that not a single penny of my estate will ever reach your hands. I'm not pressing criminal charges, though my attorneys advise I have a strong case for attempted homicide through negligence. Instead, I want you to live with the knowledge of what you were willing to do for money. I want you to see yourselves clearly, perhaps for the first time. The security camera in the corner of this room is recording your reaction to this letter. Not for legal purposes, but so that I never doubt my memory of who you truly are. To Sister Melanie. I don't blame you for any of this. You were raised in an environment where I was the outsider, the charity case they took in before having their real daughter. I hope you'll choose a different path than our parents. If you ever want to know your sister, my contact information is enclosed on a separate sheet. The choice is yours. Emily Reynolds Carson. P.S. The name I've reclaimed is my birth name from before you adopted me. It's the name of two people who would never have abandoned their daughter for money. The blood drained from my father's face as he read. My mother's hands shook so violently that the papers rustled. Melanie, who had been standing by the window, moved forward. "What is it? What does it say?" she asked. Neither parent answered. My father seemed frozen in place, but my mother began frantically gathering the papers, shoving them back into the envelope. "It's nothing. A mistake. We're leaving," she snapped. Melanie grabbed the envelope from her mother's hands. "If it's about Emily, I have a right to know." My parents stood paralyzed as Melanie read the letter, her expression transforming from confusion to horror. When she finished, she looked up at them, tears streaming down her face. "You left her to die. For money?" Her voice was barely a whisper. "You told me she died from her injuries. You said we were coming to collect her personal belongings because that's what family does." "Melanie, you don't understand the complexity of the situation," my father began, his businessman voice taking over. "What's complex about it?" Melanie's voice rose. "My tuition bill. Was my education worth my sister's life?" "She wasn't your real sister," my mother hissed. "She was never really part of our family." Melanie stepped back as if slapped. "If that's how easily you can write off someone you raised for over 20 years, what does that say about your love for me? Am I just an investment too?" "Of course not, sweetheart." My mother reached for her, but Melanie backed away. "Don't touch me," she said, her voice suddenly calm and cold. "Emily was right to write this letter. You need to see yourselves clearly, and so do I." She folded the letter carefully, placing it in her pocket, along with the separate note containing my contact information. Then she walked to the door. "Melanie, where are you going?" my father called after her. She paused in the doorway. "To find my sister, my real family." And then she was gone, leaving my parents staring at each other in the empty room, their faces ashen with the realization that their calculated cruelty had cost them not one daughter, but two. Watching the scene unfold on the security monitor, I felt a strange mix of vindication and sorrow. The family I had once belonged to had shattered completely, and despite everything they had done, some small part of me mourned what could have been. When Melanie walked out of that hospital room, the facade my parents had maintained for decades crumbled visibly. My mother collapsed into a chair, her carefully composed appearance dissolving into genuine tears for perhaps the first time in years. My father paced the room, running his hands through his hair, looking suddenly old and defeated. "Are you okay?" Marcus asked quietly, his hand on my shoulder. I nodded, unable to speak as tears streamed down my face. Rachel silently handed me tissues, her presence steady and comforting. After my parents finally left the hospital, the administration contacted the authorities. Detective Maria Alvarez arrived at Evergreen Rehabilitation Center that afternoon to take my statement. She reviewed the letter, the recorded phone call, and the security footage with professional detachment that occasionally gave way to barely concealed outrage. In 23 years on the force, I've seen some cold-hearted things, but parents abandoning their daughter for inheritance money. She shook her head. "Are you sure you don't want to press charges?" I hesitated. What exactly would they be charged with? Medical abandonment for starters. Attempted fraud. Possibly attempted homicide by negligence, though that would be harder to prove. But with the recorded phone call and their documented refusal to approve life-saving procedures, we have a solid case. I thought about it carefully. Let me sleep on it. This isn't a decision I want to make emotionally. As Detective Alvarez was leaving, the receptionist from the front desk appeared at my door. "There's a young woman here asking for Emily Reynolds. She says she's your sister." My heart jumped. "Send her in." Melanie entered cautiously, her eyes red from crying, clutching her purse like a shield. She looked so young, so vulnerable. "Emily," she said tentatively, as if unsure it was really me. "Hello, Melanie." She took a few steps closer, staring at my bandaged leg, the healing scars on my face. "They really did leave you to die?" "Yes," I said simply. Tears welled in her eyes again. "I had no idea. They told me you were already gone when they got the call, that we were coming to Seattle to collect your things because that's what family does." Her voice broke. "I believed them." "I know you did. This isn't your fault." "But it is," she burst out. "All these years I was the favorite, the real daughter. I knew how they treated you, and I never questioned it. I accepted all the advantages, the college fund, the support, while you worked 3 jobs. I was complicit." "You were a child, Melanie. Children trust their parents to define their reality." She moved closer, perching cautiously on the edge of my bed. "When I was 14, I found your old MIT sweatshirt in the basement. I asked Mom about it, and she said you had abandoned the family because you were selfish. I believed that too." We talked for hours. Really talked for the first time in our lives. She told me about her life at Northwestern, her struggles with anxiety that our parents dismissed as weakness, her growing doubts about their version of our family history. "I want to get to know my sister," she said finally, "if you'll let me." It was the beginning of a relationship I had never expected to have. Melanie returned to her dorm that night, but texted me the next morning, and every day after. Meanwhile, the legal consequences of my parents' actions began to unfold. The hospital filed a formal complaint, triggering an investigation. Local media caught wind of the story. "Parents abandon adopted daughter after accident return for inheritance." My parents' faces appeared on the evening news, their attempted deception exposed to their friends, neighbors, and business associates. 3 weeks after the confrontation, they were arrested and charged with medical abandonment and attempted fraud. They posted bail immediately, but couldn't escape the social consequences of their actions. My father's remaining business associates severed ties. Their church asked them to step down from leadership positions. Neighbors who had known me as a child crossed the street to avoid them. Through it all, my recovery continued. Physically, I was making remarkable progress. Marcus attributed it to my sheer stubbornness, but I knew it was also due to the incredible support system that had formed around me. His Marcus, with his medical expertise and unwavering encouragement, Rachel with her practical compassion, Stephanie with her fierce advocacy, and now Melanie bridging the gap between my past and future. 6 months after the accident, I attended my parents' plea hearing sitting in the courtroom with Melanie beside me. They had agreed to plead guilty to reduced charges in exchange for probation and community service. Seeing them enter in subdued business attire, looking diminished and ashamed, I felt a complex mix of emotions. There was satisfaction in seeing justice served, but also a hollow sadness for what our family could have been. The judge asked if I wanted to make a victim impact statement. I had prepared one, worked on it for weeks with my therapist. But standing there, facing the people who had raised me and then left me to die, I set aside my prepared remarks. "I want to thank you," I said simply. My parents looked up in surprise. "Your abandonment led me to discover who my real family is. Not defined by blood or legal documents, but by who stands by you in your darkest moments. In leaving me to die, you gave me the chance to truly live. I hope someday you understand what you lost was worth far more than any inheritance." As I returned to my seat, Melanie squeezed my hand. Neither of us looked back when our parents were led away. 1 year after the accident that nearly claimed my life, I stood on the balcony of my Seattle apartment, watching the sunrise over Puget Sound. My legs still ached in cold weather, and the scars on my body told the story of how close I had come to death, but I was alive and whole, in ways that transcended physical healing. Physical therapy had been a long, grueling journey. Learning to walk again required more patience than I knew I possessed. There were days when the pain was so intense, I wondered if it was worth it, but Marcus would appear at my door on those days, somehow sensing when I needed encouragement most. "The brain and body can rebuild themselves in ways that seem miraculous," he would remind me. "But they need your determination to do it." So I pushed through the pain, celebrated small victories, and gradually reclaimed my physical independence. I returned to work part-time after 8 months, my colleagues welcoming me back with genuine warmth that still surprised me. The emotional healing was more complex. Working with Dr. Abigail Carter, a trauma therapist specializing in family betrayal, I began to untangle the web of half-truths and manipulations that had shaped my understanding of family. "You've experienced a primal wound," Dr. Carter explained during one session. "Being abandoned not once but twice, first by circumstance when your birth parents died, and then by choice when your adoptive parents left you to die. Your resilience is remarkable, but it's okay to grieve." And grieve. I did, not just for what happened after the accident, but for the childhood, where I was always slightly out of place. The adolescence spent trying to earn love that should have been unconditional. The young adulthood spent believing I wasn't worthy of true family. But as the months passed, I found myself building something new and precious, a chosen family bound by love rather than obligation. Rachel became my closest friend, stopping by with homemade soup and medical gossip that made me laugh until my healing ribs ached. Stephanie checked in regularly, her legal fierceness softening into genuine concern for my well-being beyond the case. Marcus and I developed a relationship that evolved gradually from doctor and patient to friends to something deeper. Our first official date was a wheelchair picnic in Cary Park, overlooking the Seattle skyline. By the anniversary of the accident, he had become an essential part of my new life. Most surprising was my relationship with Melanie. After completing her sophomore year, she transferred from Northwestern to the University of Washington to be closer to me. I used a portion of my savings to help her finish her education, breaking the cycle of financial manipulation our parents had established. "I always wanted a sister," she told me one evening, as we cooked dinner together in my apartment. "I just didn't know how to reach past the walls they built between us." Together, we created new traditions, Sunday brunches, monthly movie marathons, holiday celebrations that bore no resemblance to the tense performative gatherings of our childhood. The legal aftermath of my parents' actions continued to unfold. Their guilty pleas resulted in 3 years of probation, 200 hours of community service each, and mandatory counseling. The court also ordered them to pay restitution for my medical expenses not covered by insurance. 6 months into their probation, I received a letter from them through their attorney. It was full of justifications, thinly disguised as apologies they had been under financial stress. They hadn't really believed I would die. They had always done their best for me under difficult circumstances. After reading it with Dr. Carter, I decided to meet with them one last time, not for reconciliation, but for closure. The meeting took place in a neutral counseling office. They looked older than they had in the courtroom, the weight of public shame and lost status etched in their faces. "We're sorry for how things turned out," my father began, his corporate apology voice firmly in place. "How things turned out," I repeated. "Not for what you did." "We've lost everything," my mother said bitterly. "Our reputation, our friends, our younger daughter. Isn't that punishment enough?" I looked at these people who had shaped so much of my life and felt an unexpected wave of pity. "You haven't lost everything," I said quietly. "You've lost what you valued most: status, appearance, control. But you never valued what truly mattered: connection, compassion, unconditional love." "We did love you in our way," my father insisted. "Your way wasn't love," I replied, "and that's why I'm here. Not to hear your apologies or offer forgiveness you haven't earned, but to thank you for teaching me what family isn't, so I could recognize what family truly is." I stood to leave, my once shattered leg now strong enough to carry me forward. "What about Melanie?" my mother called after me. "Will you turn her against us forever?" I paused at the door. "Melanie is an adult making her own choices. I won't influence her either way. The relationship she has or doesn't have with you will be based on your actions, not my words." Walking out of that office, I felt the last chains of my past finally break free. I had faced my deepest fears and survived. I had confronted those who had harmed me and maintained my integrity. I had rebuilt not just my body, but my understanding of family and belonging. Today, 1 year after the accident, my chosen family gathered in my apartment to celebrate life and new beginnings. Rachel brought her famous lasagna. Stephanie arrived with expensive wine. Marcus helped me prepare a chocolate cake that was slightly lopsided, but made with love. Melanie brought a framed photo of the four of us at Pike Place Market, my real family, engraved on the frame. As we laughed and shared stories around my dining table, I realized that sometimes the worst betrayals can lead to the greatest blessings. Family isn't defined by blood or legal documents, but by who shows up when it matters most. The people who choose to love you when it's difficult, who see your value beyond what you can provide them, who stay when it would be easier to leave. If you're watching this and questioning your worth within your family, remember that you deserve to be loved for who you are, not what you can provide. Blood relationships can be precious, but chosen family can be just as powerful. Build connections with those who recognize your value, who show up in your darkest moments, who choose you every day. Have you ever found family in unexpected places? Has someone shown up for you when your biological family couldn't or wouldn't? Share your story in the comments below. Like and subscribe if this resonated with you, and remember that sometimes our deepest wounds become the openings for our greatest healing. Thank you for being part of my extended chosen family by listening to my story. I wish you love and belonging in whatever form it finds you.